Article 430.62 addresses motor feeder short circuit and ground fault protection. This section mandates that a feeder supplying motors must have short circuit and ground fault protection that isn't set higher than the sum of two values. Firstly, the largest rating or setting of any branch circuit, short circuit and ground fault protective device that's protecting the motors, as determined from Table 430.52. Secondly, the sum of the full load currents of all the motors connected to the feeder. Article 440.22 focuses on specific ampacity requirements. This section dictates the ampacity requirements for feeders supplying hermetic refrigerant compressors. The ampacity of these feeders needs to be at least 125% of the nameplate rated load current or the branch circuit selection current, using whichever value is greater. Here's an example calculation for a real installation to determine the feeder protection and sizing. Firstly, let's consider the motor circuit. The largest rating of branch circuit short circuit protection from Table 430.52 is 20 amps for a 2 horsepower single-phase motor and 15 amps for a 3/4 horsepower single-phase motor. The sum of the motor full load currents is determined as follows. 3 2 horsepower motors at 9.7 amps each gives a total of 29.1 amps. 4 3/4 horsepower motors at 4.9 amps each gives a total of 19.6 amps. Adding these together, 29.1 amps plus 19.6 amps equals 48.7 amps. Now let's calculate the pool equipment circuit. The ampacity requirement for hermetic compressors at 208/230 volts is 125% of the nameplate rated load current, which is 37 amps multiplied by 1.25, which equals 46.25 amps. To calculate the total load, we sum the motor full load currents, which is 48.7 amps, the sum of the compressor currents, which is 46.25 amps, the sum of the transformer currents, which is 8 transformers multiplied by 0.3 amps, equaling 2.4 amps, and the sum of the step light currents, which is 35 step lights multiplied by 2 amps, equaling 70 amps. Therefore, the total load current is 48.7 amps plus 46.25 amps plus 2.4 amps plus 70 amps, which equals 167.35 amps. Moving on to feeder protection, according to Article 430.62, the feeder short circuit and ground fault protection must be set at no more than the sum of the largest rating of branch circuit protection, which is 20 amps, and the sum of the motor full load currents, which is 48.7 amps. Therefore, the minimum feeder protection required is 20 amps plus 48.7 amps, which equals 68.7 amps. Lastly, let's determine feeder ampacity. The feeder ampacity must be no less than the total load current of 167.35 amps. Therefore, the minimum feeder ampacity required is 170 amps, choosing the next standard size up.